listening to CaveRadioBroadcasting.com. The words and opinions you are about to hear are of the hosts and do not reflect the management of CaveRadioBroadcasting.com.
You are listening to a Gen Pop Media production. I'm Howard. I'm joined here by my always co-host, David DiBiase, and we got our buddy Kenny back from a short vacation. Welcome back, Ken.
I've been doing stuff. Wasn't a vacation.
No vacation.
No vacation?
No.
I thought any time away from us would be a vacation.
Well, a couple of hours a week.
No, I've just been doing stuff with 101 WIRF.
WIRF?
WRF?
Yeah.
WRF.
Nice.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
Doing my internship work, and then last Thursday I had my graduation ceremony from Specs Howard.
Oh, I saw something about that.
Yeah, I saw you graduated. Congratulations, Ken.
Yeah, congrats, man.
Yeah, I congratulate you on Facebook as well. Yeah, I saw you graduate. I didn't realize the ceremony was last Thursday.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Came up so quick.
Excellent.
Cool.
So are they going to let you run programming over there? Because I got like a bunch of CDs you could just completely take off their playlist, and I could replace them with stuff that doesn't suck.
That's what they're going to have me for.
That's what I'm hoping.
Play
I'm
stuff
hoping.
that
I'm
doesn't
hoping.
suck.
I got a direct line in there, because just for the record, Creedence Clearwater Revival never ever needs to be played on a radio station ever again, as in ever.
You don't
Well,
like
it's like,
CCR?
Oh, I kind of like CCR.
Oh,
They've been
I
on
like
playing.
CCR.
Yeah.
They've been on the oldies lately.
I don't know, man. Sorry, I kind of dig them.
Just
So
like
like
old
a bring
Aerosmith.
back
Reminds
some
me,
oldies
of, the old days and stuff.
Do you have a bad memory of
Well,
that?
CCR
Bonfires
something
and the
like
whole thing,
Yeah,
goes with it.
Never.
Hallucinogens, the whole
Well, normally I would say that it's a matter of opinion, but in this case, you're just wrong.
nine. That's all right, man.
You can feel free to do your own research, but nobody will prove me incorrect on this.
I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder how they ever sold any tickets to their concerts.
Oh, is because it was before I was born. Before I was born to enlighten people.
I see.
So part of this movement, we're going to bring people to Christ
Oh,
and turn people against Creedence Clearwater.
Now it's a CCR movement.
It is.
Was that when
my
you saw
Lord.
Striper one Wednesday
Yeah.
at the Fillmore?
Oh my good
Nice.
God.
30 years for
Kidding me?
The Hell with the Devil.
That's
You
a
know.
great album, man. That was a great
They opened
album.
up with that,
Wait,
too.
I
That's
vaguely remember
awesome,
this
dude.
band.
Yeah,
Late
how could you
80s
not
or
know?
something.
Yeah, they were an 80s Christian metal band.
Striper, dude.
Christian metal?
Yeah.
Yeah, they played
Really?
them. Yeah,
Yep.
they were.
Which they only had some good tunes, but the ones that I mainly cared about was The Hell with the Devil and Honesty.
Yeah.
And after they
Great
did Honesty,
song.
I was like, all right, I'm gone.
Yeah, gotta go. Gotta go see it.
Well, a buddy of mine's band was opening up for him. That's the whole reason why I went. I had
Okay.
2 free tickets, so I was like, screw it, let's go. I got money.
Yeah.
It's
So they had a lot of good songs off about 3 or 4 albums, and they started going downhill, and then they started to write secular music, which made it even worse. Just horrible.
oh boy.
But I couldn't believe they opened up with Hell of the Devil. I was like, I would have
That's-
done something else better than my hit
That's a
song.
good
The
album,
one,
man.
the monster, right?
Yeah.
Play that. At
I got a
the
lot of good
end.
memories.
Striper.
Hey, this is our
When that album
50th
was
show.
out.
Did you guys know that?
Really? 50?
Wow.
And I'm here for it. Wow.
Wow, Ken, happy 50th
It's,
show. It's our silver anniversary.
Is it
That
silver?
would be
Is
my
that what it
10th.
is?
Yeah.
All right, silver, man.
I think it's my 10th.
It's our silver anniversary.
Yeah.
On Down the Rabbit Hole, our 50th show. Dave,
We should all get
Mr.
we should all get
Hooper, how are you,
silver
man?
bars for that.
I'm pretty good, without a doubt.
tell me you're still pumped, dude, because you've been lighting me up all week.
I've been off the charts pumped.
You have been like the ray of sunshine in my
There's
overcast life.
there's a shift going on. Yeah, I don't want to mention it publicly, but there's this project we're working on, which we're all pretty excited about. And, of course, the book is still in production. That's not the one that we were referring to.
That came out in October, though, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The book, it's been
first,
out, right?
we're already sold out of that.
Oh,
We're doing a
okay. I
reprint.
thought so. Yeah.
That thing was delayed. I was a little naive because all these quotes, you go finding quotes on the internet, and you see a quote next to the picture of a president, and you just think that's the quote. Like, who's gonna?
Right.
So I was gathering all these quotes, and we had enough quotes to tell the story in this 401 book that's coming out. But I didn't want to just put the quotes out there. Like, I wanted them to be real. Like, they either had to be said in a speech, written somewhere. Like, they needed an actual citation just to put some credibility into this. And a lot of quotes that are considered, in conspiracy circles, in all circles, not just in these circles, that I have thought were true. We've even talked about on this show. I've come to find out that I could not find a citation for them. Doesn't mean they're not true. An example is there's a famous quote by John F. Kennedy, online there's a famous quote by John F. Kennedy where he says something along the lines, there's a plot in this country to enslave every man, woman, and child, somewhere along those lines. Now, in my heart of hearts, I do believe he either said that or wrote that in a letter to someone at some point. But trying to find the citation of where it is actually in print, probably that's the most extreme example because I was really hell-bent on trying to find it.
It's a good quote.
After 10 hours of literally looking through everything, JFK archives, letters that he wrote to chiefs of staff, his personal memoir, just everything. He didn't have memoirs as far as I know, but finally had to pull it because I could not find a citation. And it's interesting, though, that people actually put a lot of effort to debunk quotes. And a lot of the quotes that have been, quote-unquote, debunked, I actually did find citations. It makes you think, who would go out of their way to say something really wasn't said when it was? What would their motivation be? Like, if you hear a quote that you don't think's true, would you go out of your way to... I think that maybe is what a lot of these intelligence guys are really doing online, that, we've got 2 million of them in social media and stuff like that. Nonetheless, that was an example of a quote that we've even used on this show, and I've since stopped using it. I can't... If anyone out there ever finds where that was said, let me know. Call in.
We got $10 for you.
$10.
And Howard will send it to you. So that's an example of something that I thought was just going to be like, we've got this thing done because we've got tons
Well,
of...
if you love the quote, let me ask you, if you love the quote, why can't you put the quote in the book and put the author as unknown, and then just say that it was credited to John F. Kennedy, but blah, blah, blah.
Uncited quotes, but it's almost like, because you could just make it up. I mean, you could write an article for a blog and then just make that picture with that quote there to go along with what it is you're trying to sell, and then that image is captured on the web somewhere. Yep. So when you Google, Ben Franklin quotes, well, I mean, maybe that picture pops up in the search, and it's just somebody's blog that wrote, or a school paper or whatever. Either way, it's just a created. It's possible. If it's not cited, then it's probably completely manufactured for some purpose.
I don't think I've been able to find quotes get distorted a little bit, but it's funny, Howard, because there really is a plot in this country too,
and it could be paraphrased.
But I was going to just cross out John F. Kennedy and put my own name down, because if he didn't say it, I'll say it.
I'm saying it.
But somewhere along the way, things that presidents said in speeches through the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, a reporter puts it in an old newspaper and the quote takes off, but the attribution is never there, and it exists in, you have to do some deep digging. I actually got a membership to this website. I think it's called newspapers.com, where you can go in and search, and it's OCR, meaning you can search for any word, and it will pull up from any newspaper printed pretty much ever, anywhere. And there's a lot. That has actually been a gold mine of...
What is it? What's the website for that? What is it?
I believe it's newspapers.com.
Dude, that's cool.
So like I actually looked up my own name and, little articles that had come out 20 years ago because of business, or the little the section in the Free Press, for instance, that has business people. This guy got promoted to this guy got promoted to that kind of thing. Like in 1993, I was in that once, and I looked it up, and I looked up my name, and that actually, it came out like it was in the 1993 something or other Detroit Free Press. And anything, like I actually looked up my dad's name, and came to find out that in the 1930s, very frequently, social events happening on Grosse Seal appeared in a section in the Detroit Free Press. Under, I forgot what that section was called. It was like, something like social happenings and stuff.
Okay.
Some of the most mundane things I've ever read were in there, but it was weird because I actually read, for instance, that Lewis and Ethel Mary Hooper, my grandmother and grandfather, hosted a dance for the Grosse Ile high school and the soldiers that were going off to the military in 1943, and the thing was held at this little clubhouse on Grosse. Just it was weird to see that, but we'll hop on it later. You guys should
that sounds
punch in
so
your own
cool
name and you just go looking.
I'd be afraid I'd find my obituary.
That would be weird in a future newspaper.
Yeah,
I was more afraid I'd find like an arrest warrant out there.
Yeah,
like,
be like,
on
APB
well,
issued.
we know you already Googled me, Dave, and Kat. So
no, I actually didn't. But I would. Like, we'll go look it up. And I will use that as a chance to remind everyone, if for whatever reason, because of the things that we talk about, the things we write about, these people they just kind of get in trouble with stuff. It's not that they're troublemakers, but the mainstream media makes them look like troublemakers. I was reminded of this while I was studying Bill Cooper this week. But if you are... if you guys ever read, like, I'm in jail for tax evasion or some heinous
tax
crime,
evasion's the one that's always,
that's always like
fishy to me.
And it's funny because I was audited 2.5. I just got out of an audit 2 years ago, right as I started making that movie, Anatomy of a Great Deception. But these guys, so like Bill Cooper, for instance, he'd had, and they were all bullshit, all of them. But he had arrest warrants against him for tax evasion, for illegally participating in militias, for disturbing the peace, for domestic abuse. So when real, authentic sheriffs and law enforcement officers, get a sheet of paper, which they themselves trust, by the way.
Right.
And they're reading, they think they're going up against a crazed frickin' madman.
Yeah.
And not realizing that they themselves are deceived. So it was interesting because Bill Cooper apparently discovered a few interesting things. There was actually a plan to have him arrested on the evening of September 11th, 2001. Now remember, he was made famous for several reasons, one of them being that he predicted that there was going to be a major event in New York City and that Osama bin Laden would be blamed on it, but it would be all...
Yeah, that was actually isn't that from one of his radio broadcasts?
Yeah.
It was from actually several radio broadcasts. There was a 2-minute clip of that particular... of a broadcast, which I think was his from a June 26th, 2001 broadcast. It was 6 weeks before 9/11, where he said, there's this thing that's going to happen in New York. They're going to blame it on, I don't know exactly what it is, but whatever it is, don't believe it. This is another step towards a new world order. Right after, they're going to come a series of erosion of freedoms. They're going to create a war in the Middle East. And all these things came to pass.
Yeah.
And since then, with our own eyes, we went to look at 9/11 to realize, holy cow, this was an absolutely fabricated false flag. And but the first time he had mentioned it was in March or so of 2001. And at that time, he and his co-hosts started discussing the fact that they were being followed and monitored constantly, and that there were outside law enforcement agencies trying to serve warrants on him. And he happened to have a good relationship with the chief of police of Eager, Arizona, who would never... He would always say, "This is my jurisdiction. You don't go fulfill a warrant on one of my citizens." So he actually protected Bill Cooper quite a bit, and it's one of the reasons they went outside the Eager police. They had the Apache sheriffs come in to ultimately arrest him. Now, the original plan was for him to be arrested on 9/11. But they couldn't do it because he was broadcasting live that day well into the night, well beyond normal hours, because it was such an unbelievable day. And, of course, it was a prophetic broadcast because what he had been predicting just a few weeks earlier now happened. Holy cow, it now happened. And before anyone could know Osama bin Laden, newscasters 3 minutes after the first building was hit are already starting to mention Osama bin Laden. I mean, just... utterly effing staged, and you can go back and prove it. And there's hundreds of movies that people want to discuss it. So they had to reroute their plans, and they ended up doing it on the night of November 5th. And they once again waited till his broadcast was over, and that's why his ambush, and it was an ambush, began at I think it was 11:15 or 11:45 at night, where sheriffs posed as teenagers. They had a bunch of other armed officers under a tarp in the back of a truck. His broadcasting partner, Doyle Shamley, they were actually supposed to also go get him. The reason all this information came out is a local Eager police officer had actually parked a car at Doyle Shamley's house, which deterred the sheriffs, and there were other agencies involved. Homeland Security was there. There were helicopters all over the air, and he was protected that night. And Doyle Shamley, as the event was unfolding, started talking to some of the officers that had now just gunned down Bill Cooper. Bill Cooper's now dead. He's on his porch. He's got at least 9 gunshots in him. I was looking at that autopsy report, and he's talking to some of the sheriffs that were involved. Now, you got to understand, these guys aren't, quote-unquote, in the Illuminati. They're not part of the New World Order. These are just good, regular guys that wanted to serve the public by becoming a law enforcement officer. They were just sheriffs. And he's talking to the chief officer that was in charge of this arrest ambush, which was never intended to be an arrest. They had orders to shoot him and kill him before he could get into his house because they didn't want another Ruby Ridge or Waco. And Doyle Shamley and this head sheriff, and again, this sheriff is a patriotic, normal guy. He's just following orders. He and Doyle start this relationship, and over time, the sheriff starts to realize that all these things about Bill Cooper, this man that just got gunned down, were bullshit. There really weren't. There was no tax evasion. There was no one had ever pressed charges of domestic abuse. All these things that they thought they were going to get this really bad guy, this chief sheriff, and his name escapes me, he comes to realize they weren't true. So this chief sheriff, again, he's a patriotic guy. He starts asking questions, and he wants to do an internal audit of his own department to find out how the hell did we end up going to arrest a guy that really had no arrest warrants against him. That all this stuff was fabricated. And true to form, on the day of a parade in Eager, Arizona, he was riding a motorcycle in the parade, and a car that they never caught broadsided him, ran over him, and drove off. I don't know if the sheriff survived or not. I'm recounting the story from Doyle Shamley, but I suspect he died because, again, he was looking into... So this is a long-winded reminder that if you ever hear that I committed suicide, or any of us did, I suspect the same goes true.
Yeah,
for
that's
you,
yeah.
Or you threw your wife in the ocean, or something ridiculous.
Right.
Just all I'm going to say is take a deeper look into what we're talking about. It just lends some authenticity.
Yeah, this is a good example of that because I actually am reading his book right now, about almost
Behold
halfway
the Pale
through
Horse?
it. Yeah,
I started reading it too.
it's really good. It's some of it's heavy read, but you got to maybe a couple times go back over it. But because I want to start looking into them because it's an interesting story, and if you say go to Wikipedia and look up Bill Cooper, the story on there is so interesting because it's very short and nothing like what you just said. I mean, they it's a little bit true. So in other words, they were going after him for tax evasion. Went to serve. I guess there was a warrant out for him for a while, and they just couldn't. They never caught up with him, and he never turned himself in. They finally go to arrest him, and he shot a federal agent in the head and killed him, and then they killed Bill Cooper, and he was noted as saying that they'll never take me alive.
Well,
that's basically the Wikipedia version.
It's interesting. He did say in broadcast, they're not going to take me alive, because he knew what the real reason.
It's a little bit true, right? There's all this little,
and it wasn't. Cooper is credited with shooting that officer Martinez, I think was his name, in the head. But one of the reasons the chief sheriff started looking into this is that he felt he was the one that had accidentally shot his own sheriff in the head, and he was guilt-ridden, and he was looking into it, and he was looking at ballistics angles, and because he thought in that moment that it was his own shot. And then he reads in police reports that none of his own officers even filed that Cooper had made the shot, and he shared with Doyle Shamley that that would have been impossible based on his position and things of that nature.
Yeah.
But
the book is good though. It's
it's heavy.
It's pretty good. Yeah, the first chapter is really good. It's and it's not actually something he wrote, right? It was some document from 1969 they found in a copy machine or something at I forget the whole story.
Well, he wrote the book Behold a Pale Horse.
Yeah, but the first chapter is actually a reprint with his emphasis in it of a document that was found.
Be careful. There's a false Behold a Pale Horse that has something in there.
It was. I thought that's what I read in the first chapter was something out of some document that it was found.
The version that I say I'm reading, I should say listening to, is one that is read by Bill Cooper himself. And
okay,
I know it's his voice.
I got the PDF that PDF.
Oh, right. Oh, that okay. So yeah, I didn't check that. I didn't know enough. I just sent you the first link. After that, I found out that apparently some copies or versions of it had been corrupted in some way, and I don't know if it's minor, major, what it is. But that propaganda that I was telling Howard, I was watching some very back-end filler information on JFK, because the similarities between 9/11 and JFK are off the charts. And this is part of AGD 2, which we're working on now, where we make the link between all these reporters across the nation on September 11th, 2001, start talking about how 3 buildings collapsed before the 3rd building collapsed. A building that had not been hit by an airplane, a building that had just some superficial damage to it. This is World Trade Center Building 7, which collapsed in on itself at free fall speed. It was an absolute demolition job. Kerosene doesn't burn nearly hot enough. It only fools believe this stuff. But it was interesting because that was one of the things that tipped me off that something was very fishy here, that all of a sudden people are saying, a building that has just had essentially a minor fire in it, collapsed in on itself, was made out of steel. That has never happened, except for on 9/11, it happened 3 times. And no, folks, jet fuel, it's kerosene. And kerosene is not, it won't even melt your kerosene lantern, all right? It's no hotter than the flames. It doesn't melt pan. It's not hot enough. Not even close, yet they found molten steel, which is thousands and thousands of degrees to get to that. So I found this, whenever I find signs of an MO, kind of the way like you track certain crimes because the MO's the same. We used an example once, a guy that carves his initials on every body. Then you find this happening with other dead bodies, you'd start to think these crimes are linked. Yes, I mean, unless you're an idiot.
Right, as you should.
So for that reason, and a lot of other reasons, so many strange things happen on JFK along with 9/11, but one of the things in JFK was the way the news was broadcast about it. In the same way that in 9/11, before any newscaster could possibly have known that 3 buildings would collapse, they're announcing 3 buildings had collapsed, past tense. Yet it had not happened yet, nor had it ever happened. So that is not an accident. It's, newscasters are just reading the sheet of paper put in front of them. Who gets that sheet of paper put in front of them, that's a deeper mystery. So flash forward to JFK, the most famous news bulletin, I think, in recent American history is Walter Cronkite breaking in. I think it was CBS, whatever news service he was with. Within a few minutes, he is reading 3 shots fired in Dallas. Yet, every witness that was there, from Zapruder to all the people that were near the grassy knoll, that were in the stretch, every last one of them, and you can actually go online and see their on-the-spot testimony. All of them are saying there was a hail of gunfire, multiple bullets. Some people are saying 7, 8 shots. Some people are saying, well, shots are coming from behind that fence and behind that wall, pointing to the grassy knoll. Some were saying every single witness, every person that was there had talked about a hail of bullets, that he'd been shot in the front. Yet, here again, our newscasters are broadcasting something where they could not possibly have derived that piece of information in any other way other than it had been pre-written. And there's a lot of other stuff in there, but I'd once heard how Oliver Stone's portrayal of JFK had all these inconsistencies in there, and I've looked into it myself. His portrayal of what happened in JFK, the only place he took an artistic liberty was with Mr. X. But at a National Press Club conference after the release of JFK, he had said that Mr. X was Fletcher Prouty, a colonel that was the liaison between the CIA and the Pentagon. And Prouty was at this press conference, and he's nodding his head saying, yes, 80% of everything that Mr. X said was from me, and the other 20% came from another man whose name escapes me, but was also at the same press conference. And he said that's the only place he took an artistic liberty, was to combine those 2 guys into this one mysterious character. Everything else is actually documentable. It's verifiable. It is part of the real record of American history. So you've got Walter Cronkite beginning the 3-shot. You got to say it early and say it often and say it first. It's Joseph Goebbels 101 Nazi Germany. What people don't realize is that Zapruder film, if you've ever seen a shooting, if you've ever seen President John F. Kennedy's shooting, you're probably looking at, I want to say it was Hans Zapruder, his famous Abraham, thank you. Abraham Zapruder's ultra-famous handheld camera of the shooting. But for 5 years, the public did not see it. It was only the first time it was ever shown to any public was the jury of the Clay.
Bertram.
Thank you. Bertrand and Clay. What was his? Clay Bertrand.
Shaw.
Clay Shaw. Thank you. Was at his trial, which I think was 1968, 69, somewhere in there. So this video had been just kept quiet. Now, who kept it quiet? Abraham Zapruder had a bidding war right after this videotape was made. And all these news agencies were bidding on it. Well, Time won the bidding war. Now, we all know already that the mainstream media, the heads of it, are all child-sacrificing members of this evil organization. Nonetheless, you'd still think that they would have an interest in putting an unbelievable video out of the assassination of a president. But what do? They stick it in their archives, hide it from people. So what you instead had was reporters like Dan Rather, who were very young in his day. Now, if you go back and look at that Abraham Zapruder film now, you see Kennedy, and Kevin Costner made it famous, back and to the left. And by the way, every word that Costner spoke in JFK in that courtroom that was actually spoken by Jim Garrison, including his closing, which was there was nothing they added, but they put 80% of what Jim Garrison said in his closing argument. So that was Jim Garrison's closing argument. So the back and to the left comment that we all know through movie history was, clearly visible to anyone. And it obviously indicates that shots came from the front. However, further emphasizing the deception, same style of deception that we saw on 9/11, where prefabricated news and in some case newsmen telling outright lies. You've got a young Dan Rather who said, I saw the video myself, because Dan Rather was at the bidding war in Abraham Zapruder's living room or wherever he held this thing. And Dan Rather, he thinks he's talking about a video that I think he believed would never come to public light. And within days of the assassination of Kennedy, Dan Rather specifically says, I saw the president shot from the rear. He slumped forward in a seat. And he goes on to explain this. But Kennedy never slumped forward in his seat. He was jolted backward, and then he fell to his left side onto Jacqueline's lap. And I just thought to myself, well, here are what my real thoughts were. I thought to myself, you are a fucking liar. Because he went out of his way to say, I don't know if we'll ever see this video, but I saw it with my own eyes. The president was hit from behind. It threw him forward in the car. He fell to the ground. He slumped forward. Starting to pound out this.
What do you think the possibility is? He was just having a Brian Williams moment. I mean, do you think he was actually part of the deception, or do you think he was just saying he saw something he didn't really see?
Considering where his career went, I think that someone said, "Here's what you're going to say if you want to ever have."
Yeah, that's what I would think.
A job in news.
Yeah, and we'll give you,
You'll be like a made man.
Yeah, you'll be good. Yeah, you do this, you're good.
Flash forward,
or you have to, threaten his job. He's,
Flash forward 30 or so years later, right around the time JFK's coming out, Peter Jennings, all handsome, all well-spoken, trusting, good-looking Peter Jennings comes and says, and now that if anyone that's looked into JFK for themselves, at least has, look, I think it's 89% of the country now thinks that it was absolutely a conspiracy. After JFK, though, the numbers weren't nearly that close. What JFK did is got people to look into it for themselves. And when they started seeing the details, they're like, well, wait a minute. This is the story that was concocted. It's laughable. on a million levels, the same way as 9/11. The only type of people that works on are brainwashed idiots, which I think we're going to spend the second half hour talking about signs you're brainwashed. So there's a segue here.
Interesting.
So where was I going with this? News. Oh, so Peter Jennings in our time, sorry for being so blunt, fucking liar. And I'm sorry if that blows your image of Peter Jennings. Because, there used to be a time where I used to listen to him to try and understand how the world's working. But I've come to since realize that putting your trust in people like that is dangerous because they're not here to tell the truth. They're here to sell an agenda. And that is what our media does. So he gets up and he goes, it's now been, I don't know what he said, 40 years since John F. Kennedy was killed. And not a single piece of credible evidence has ever been brought to light that implies anyone other than Lee Harvey Oswald shot the president. And I saw that this week. And once again, I was thinking to myself, I'm just going to be honest, you fucking liar. There is so much evidence that Oswald had really nothing to do with this. Actually, there's much more evidence that Oswald was directly working for J. Edgar Hoover, infiltrating the CIA, knowing full well that there was a plot within the CIA to kill the president, hence that mysterious fax that went out the day before, or a few days before his assassination, saying they're going to shoot the president. That information, I suspect, came from Oswald. But man, look into it, folks. That is real history, and I can't handle. I don't know I can't handle sheep right now. I just can't.
Well, you're seeing it real time, all the time. This kind of stuff never stops. I've noticed it with. If you wouldn't know any better, you would think Fidel Castro is a hero.
Yeah.
Oh,
according to the President of the United States.
According to a lot of people, actually. This is very interesting to me. All of a sudden, so if I've been, I mean, some of the things I've heard people say about him are, frankly, flabbergasting. He's the charismatic leader that will be, remembered fondly, and the way he transformed that nation, and this, and then you see pictures of the truck that's going to, take his ashes to wherever. It's Havana. You've seen pictures of Havana.
My dad was living in Havana.
Well, it used to be like high-end, cosmopolitan. Like Havana was the place.
Under Bautista.
The place.
Prior to Castro.
Now?
It was a wonderful...
I mean, now look at it. Look at pictures of it now, and it's like, wait a minute. And it's just, you could say this over, and people who don't really know any better, don't know the real... what really kind of went on, and is still going on, by the way, will just be like, oh, I remember seeing him on the news or hearing about, maybe he wasn't such a bad guy. He's, it's kind of, to me, it's...
Well, in my house, we were
insane.
Specifically aware of what happened in Cuba because my dad had been living in Havana. After college, he moved. He wanted to get into plastics in South America, and you know how life goes. He's in Havana under the Bautista government, which was a free government, and Havana was gorgeous back then.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful city. Castro comes to power through a military coup. It's a revolution. A lot of my dad's friends were murdered. My dad was, as an American, was allowed to leave the country, and the rules at the time were you can leave the country with one suitcase and $5. Everything else, you had to stay. So he always would tell this story of his last night in Havana. They went out with their friends. He spent all the money he had on drinks for a bunch of people, and several people were going to be leaving the country the next day. They bathed a car in champagne. They were just pissing away the money because they couldn't leave with it, because it was going to be staying in this communist country. And up through the Kennedy administration and up through even Reagan.
Oh, yeah.
Cuba and communism.
Dude, Nixon, Ford, none of these people.
These were known as evil systems, socialist systems on par with Nazi Germany.
Oh, yeah.
And look how long it took. Less than a generation. Because now I've heard those same reports you
It's
have this week.
unbelievable.
College kids
Yeah.
are so, I'm sorry I'm swearing so much today, folks, but so fucking stupid that they're so impressionable that they're actually saying that, oh, Fidel Castro, well, he was a good man that did some good things.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, he has the same ideology as Bernie Sanders. They're a fucking
Well,
hero.
there's the audio of Bernie Sanders praising that man.
if you don't understand
It just exposes
how
that,
your own mind is manipulated by the mainstream media. I don't know what the or else comment is, but I'd like to beat the crap out of you. I know why Bill Cooper was so pissed on his by the end of his broadcasts, because he broadcast 1,926 episodes of Hour of the Time. And, I mean, he just called his audience, he basically, not his own audience, because his audience were the cutting edge of reality. That was talk about that dude. What a hero. What courage it took that man to say what he said. And to have all these things actually come to pass. Everything he predicted is absolutely in play. There really is a new world order in play. The powers that be, these Luciferian secret society member elites want a one world government. And they're on the frickin' verge of it. I mean, 20 years ago, you couldn't see that. I mean, anyone that said it was a wacko. But now it's in the Charter of the United Nations. It's not a conspiracy theory anymore. It's public information. But in his broadcast, by the end, he's just saying, "You stupid sheeple, you are." And he would be swearing, and I totally get it.
Yeah, it can get it's frustrating. It is, and the perfect example is this thing I brought up with Fidel. I mean,
Right.
with Castro. I'm just sitting back going, and people are. They believe anything. They'll believe anything.
No, if they see it on TV, they'll believe it.
And it's amazing. I mean, I didn't know it, but I think it's either Mark Levin or Breitbart. I can't remember the source. It was radio, nevertheless. But Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, said a bunch of really nice things about Fidel Castro. And it turns out that...
It was Breitbart.
Breitbart, all right. His father actually was really good buds with Fidel, and when his father bid it, Fidel was actually a pallbearer at his father's funeral. Justin Trudeau's father had Fidel Castro as a pallbearer at his funeral. These guys were boys.
Yeah.
You don't like, you're not like boys with somebody like that. And
you're an ally of the United States.
Well, and don't agree on at least the ideology.
Do you guys understand the World Wrestling Federation metaphor here?
Yeah.
These guys are all buddies behind the scenes, and they just play enemies on the world stage. But they have a greater oath to each other than they do to the citizens of their own nations. And at the end of the day, the New World Order, this one world government, will be a socialist, absolute Nazi type of society. Nazi Germany was nothing but a run-up. It was a test to see how far they could go. And I think the results were off the charts. The same way Oklahoma City was a run-up to 9/11. 9/11 was a run-up to something that's coming, and we've talked about what possibly that is. We don't know exactly what it is, but anyone that wakes up, opens their eyes a little bit, knows there is some sort of world catastrophic event that's coming that is going to break down society. It's the chaos before order. It's we're seeing it in themes of movies all the time. And at the end of the day, this one world society will, by definition, have to be socialist. So it does not surprise me at all that the hearts and minds of the population, the sheeple, as Bill Cooper used to refer to them, are now starting to change their opinions about former hated socialist dictators, and they're now starting to say, oh, yeah, they were good guys. It makes total sense.
Yeah, candy coat the idea, like repackage it, make it a little more creative, because eventually all of these things will, according to Mr. Cooper's analysis.
Not just Cooper.
But I mean, that's where I read it was from him, is it's like the final synthesis is the whole, capitalism versus socialism, communism, all the other isms that are kind of in the same grouping, and this will become totalitarian socialism, which would be a new form of the people that are pushing these ideas about socialism, and it's all cool, and all of a sudden communism became cool. I don't know what's going. It's weird. I mean, you notice that like these things are being cheered on in our country. Well,
it leads to dictatorship.
It leads to exactly.
Dictatorship leads to tyranny.
That's what it is.
If you say something against the government, you're killed.
Well, that's what happened in Cuba. I mean, he literally was sinking boats with people on them because now it's so awesome that not only can you not leave, but if you do leave, they'll kill you
and your remaining family
and your family. And so people are literally floating on garage doors or whatever they can find to get out of there. It's so awesome. So all this stuff about him being some kind of hero, some kind of icon for the ages, is kind of disgusting.
Yeah, but
actually.
think all the free shit the Cuban people got.
It's kind of disgusting.
If my dad had listened to some of these college kids talking, and I'm sure they don't know anything other than someone along the way said, "Oh, Fidel Castro was it." My dad, that was a brave man, honorable man. Like that's lost in our generation. It's just gone. We are a bunch of greedy little bitches at the end of it. But my dad would have been specifically upset because Castro had several of my dad's friends murdered.
Yeah.
Murdered.
Yeah.
And when that
tens
happens,
of thousands
like,
of people.
Oh, and
Yeah.
he'd be spinning in his grave right now if you could hear it.
Yeah. But that's going on. That's
But don't do any research, folks. I'm sure Anderson
Don't
Cooper,
read a book
the
or
son of
anything.
Gloria Vanderbilt, he's a good guy. The second richest family in America. He's earned his way on to be a CNN reporter. And he'll tell you the truth.
It's so insidious that this
Please.
happened in a public high school or a history teacher, and I know because I know the person that was in the class. Was teaching history, world history, and made a statement along the lines that the men like Marx and Engels and Lenin and Stalin and these folks, and even on some levels Adolf Hitler, were not really the bad guys they're portrayed to be. They were just misunderstood. And da-da-da-da-da. It turns out this teacher studied in Moscow and is a friggin' commie. Sorry. Now, when you're in high school, you're in history class. You learn this as history, right? So think about this. This is how evil this gets. Is later down the line, you hear somebody like you or I or us talking about how horrible these people were, but it's already in their mind that they were just misunderstood. Yeah. So then they think we're whack jobs, and you turn the whole story upside down.
That's part of the program.
And in time, the brainwashing that happens, in time, history gets scrubbed, rewritten, and reaccepted as history. And
history's written by winners.
And then, and it's even changed.
Look at it. I mean, you just look at it. You look at, I'm sorry, the part of the Kennedy assassination that is the absolute part I can't believe. It's someone trying to explain the lone bullet theory. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. And for people to be like, oh, yeah.
No,
right.
But even all that stuff you're talking about, that stuff that's in, because I've never looked into it. You have. All that stuff you're talking about in the movie, that's all actual transcripted, the one bullet theory, all that weirdo stuff.
I mean, it was in the Warren Report.
It's all actual.
Our inspector came up with it.
Exactly, he did. And when he came up, and think about this, because he was in politics for his whole life. He was probably a made guy.
Yeah.
He came up with it, and there were 9 other guys that said, "Dude, this is so laughable.
But
I don't want to be. I don't want to be a part of it." Arlen Specter pushes this effed up theory through. It doesn't even account for bullets that were in the windshield, that were in the dashboard of the car. And then to have that very bullet that's gone through essentially 2 bodies, several limbs, to have it be pristine.
Bone, right? It went through bone.
It went through Connolly's wrist. It ends up in his shin.
Through bone.
It went through Kennedy's vertebrae.
It was perfect.
Perfect.
Yeah.
The only theory I've heard ever that's as laughable as that is that flying an airplane into the World Trade Center
bring down-
could make it come down in on itself at the speed of free fall. It's like me shooting a bullet into an oak tree, halfway up the oak tree, and that whole oak tree collapsing in on itself at the speed of free fall. It's the exact same
And then the
metaphor.
bullet ends up
pristine
on the ground of the on the floor of the forest. Perfect.
And it would be like the airplane flew out the other side of it completely intact. Well, anyone that has ever fired a gun or seen a bullet that's been fired knows full well those things get distorted like...
Yeah, even a Full Metal Jacket going through those kind of targets would show some... It would show some deformity, I would think, unless it was... and there are rounds that would be able to... But it probably wouldn't be something that you or I could get our hands on.
But like arguing 9/11, look, the guys that deceive us, they're not dumb. They don't just deceive us on one level. We're
surrounded
There's
by it.
so many that when you try and argue with someone verbally, and I have personal experience with this, when you try and explain to them that a squib should not be blowing out of the World Trade Center 80 floors below the airplane accident a minute before the building collapses. When you explain it, they will come up with some sort of internal justification for how that might have happened. And they kind of shut
many
you
times they can't.
Well,
they can't even come up with it.
Or they'll
make it up.
They just refuse to believe you. Well, you give them facts. You give them facts, and they look at you like a deer in the headlights and just like, well, I don't believe that.
Well, look,
okay, so what are your facts
if
for not
I had
believing
to
it?
explain squibs and only squibs, like if I'm defending the official story of 9/11, I could probably figure out a way to defend it. But when you have to describe squibs, molten lava, the building caving in from the middle of the building, the center of it, from the elevators being shut down. When you add it all together, you've got to be just an utter dumbass or ignorant. I think those are two very different things. You're either a dumbass, a coward, or you're ignorant. And I was driving up here thinking those are going to be the 3 new requirements of all my friends. They can have none of those traits. You can't be dishonorable. You cannot be a little pansy coward, and you can't be stupid, or I just can't have you in my
even
life.
deal with it.
It's too bad that you came up with it 15 years after the event. But the kerosene heater theory is the best argument against... What is wrong with my phone? Sorry.
It has nothing to do with you not turning your ringer off.
Is the best argument that 9/11 is bullshit that I've ever heard. I mean, I had kerosene heaters back in the 80s at my old shop. Why did it melt the steel?
Well, I would say, you could take a fuel and with forced air raise the temperature enough to forge steel. To get it, to forge it. That's how you hammer. That's how you hammer forged steel.
Yeah,
but,
perfect conditions, tons of oxygen.
But to turn it into molten steel
now you
takes
need 3,000 degrees.
Something like this.
You can forge steel around 900 degrees. There's a massive.
Yeah, it just
massive
gets soft, but and then red hot. But it's not liquid.
But people,
so I don't know. You really couldn't. You need something. You need pretty special.
Well,
way
I thought
to heat.
it just happened that if you spend your whole life just watching comedy shows, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I watch them. I still watch football. I mean, I got Stephon Diggs tonight for the Vikings. I hope he has a good night. I'm into sports. It's a balanced life, but that's not all I do. I actually try and learn a little bit about some stuff in this world. Now, I never connected the fact that jet fuel is kerosene.
Yeah, basically.
Kerosene is jet fuel. I bought into the jet fuel. Wow, that must burn.
That's like race
so
car
hot.
fuel. Yeah.
Well,
but then when I find out it's just kerosene, I'm like, well,
it's actually less refined
wait a minute.
than gasoline.
It's less explosive, but you can.
It is. I mean, by design. I
Yeah.
mean, they've been making jet fuel less explosive, less hot for safety reasons for years. And if you can't dig your head out of the sand long enough If you're that mentally fucking lazy, sorry, I'm on a roll tonight.
What's up with the F-bombs?
Man.
Eric?
If you're that lazy,
Did Shelter show up?
Jeez.
then you know what? Whatever you got coming to you is what you got coming to you. Yeah, you know, I don't. Shit. Can we take a break? I got to compose myself.
Yeah,
Let's
sure.
take a break.
I'll tell you what we got coming to you. We got a break coming to you. So we'll be back. We're going to talk about...
Please forgive me for all the F-bombs.
We're going to fill in the
Fucking
blank
A.
on you've been deceived if.
Yeah, you know you're brainwashed if.
We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to Down the Rabbit Hole. We have taken a little break, and now we're back dealing with our topic, which is, you are...
Signs you're brainwashed.
Signs you're brainwashed.
And I'm sorry for
or you could be a moron if.
Well, that's a much bigger list.
Yeah.
Because I'm a moron, but I'm
Let's just do
not
away with
brainwashed.
let's do away with political correctness. Let's just make it go away.
I think we started that a year ago, and definitely this hour we're...
Well, definitely 50 episodes in. We are
50.
50.
Wow.
Start to feel old.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Goes by quick.
It does.
Yeah.
And it's been good. I've learned a lot
Yeah, me too.
just by... Because now we have multiple people researching. I've learned a ton from you guys. And
Yeah,
like
same
any
here.
teacher,
That's
you
huge.
learn your subject better when you teach it. It
Yeah.
forces you to answer questions you didn't even know you had. Like, how does X
Well,
get
one of
to Z?
the things I really enjoy about this show that this show has brought to our collective, our community, is that we have agreed that is important. That as a group, since we're a group that's working together, we have a mission, we have a higher goal. We talk about that all the time, but this radio show is a large part of it. But there's more at work here. There's more stuff about to come out. Working on a second movie. Got a book or two coming out. But I think what's really cool is we have agreed between us that we will come to a consensus opinion on certain things. And one of the things I pride myself on is, I am opinionated. I admit it, okay? I'm very opinionated. But if you can give me a compelling argument how I might be mistaken, I'm open-minded enough to go, whoa. And that's what I think is really cool about this show, at least for us, is we have reversed opinions on issues.
Oh yeah, dude.
Over the course of the shows.
I actually love that. Like, I don't take it personal.
Yeah.
Like, I don't
No,
get defensive or prideful about it. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Like, it's the whole the perfect one was the founding and these documents that you brought out. It's like, oh, okay.
I was really proud of that, man. That
It was pretty well. It was awesome for me because I wouldn't have, unless you had that on your mind. I wouldn't have looked into it that deep.
And for me, you're someone who has done nothing but give me credible information after credible information. You know what you're talking about before you talk about things. Okay, that I've found this to be the case way more often than not over our relationship. And so, when you say something to me, I usually take it at face value. Okay, must be the way it is.
Yeah.
And in one of those rare instances where I find something that's contrary to an opinion you've given me, it's cool to go in there and research it and talk about it. And I think that's one of the really cool things that's going on here is that over the course of time, our listeners will understand where we stand. We always say the same thing: do your own research. We're not saying that what we believe is true is absolutely correct. It's just what we believe. It's what our research has led us to.
Yeah, and these things change. Like, there's a good it's a good example of it. It could change. I think I said it before. Here is really this show is almost a broadcast version of our own educations. Like, everyone's kind of like we're learning along while we're doing this.
Yep.
We're not really coming out as like the foremost experts on anything.
Right.
We're like kind of learning as we go too. So I think that gives kind of a cool.
Now, if there's one common
angle to it,
message,
too.
it is do your own research. Just do your own.
You've got no excuse.
Don't trust any one person. Look at it with your own eyes.
And there's no excuse anymore to not know what's going on. You can find it. I mean, if it really matters to you, you can find out what's going on.
Now, Actually, this is one of the signs that you're brainwashed, is if you discount anything on the internet.
just dismissive.
Because it was on the internet, you're brainwashed.
Or you believe what you believe, and that's just
actually
it.
with the internet, yeah, there is some bullshit information in there, and there's been bullshit information in libraries since the beginning of writing. But right now, we have access to the largest library ever assembled in human history.
Very true.
And you don't even have to get in your car to drive down between the hours of 9 and 8 p.m. It's 24/7. You can access any information worldwide at any time.
It's all there.
Yeah.
Here's another. You are you're brainwashed. That's what it is. You're brainwashed.
Yeah, you know you're brainwashed.
You know you're brainwashed if you've never spent any time on WikiLeaks, but assume it's a hoax.
Yep.
But think it's a disinformation site. Because the funny thing about WikiLeaks is this dude was a freaking hero until he started throwing mud at Hillary Clinton. And now all of a sudden, all these people who they don't know who Snowden is. They don't know what's going on. All of a sudden, they know WikiLeaks, and it's bad.
Well, it's interesting because now it's flipped with WikiLeaks. Because when that first started, and people first started hearing about WikiLeaks, he was a traitor.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, they were going after him.
Until everything proved to be true.
Well, then, right, he becomes almost a hero to the people that assumed in the beginning he was more of the traitor. It went from negative to positive, but the other way around now, because of what came out of it, doesn't favor that side. Now he's bad. Right? It's just a matter of convenience, what position they take on anything at any given time. Starts off, he's probably, a hero. Then it turns out the content of that goes against your side of the team, right? So then now it's a hoax, it's BS now.
And
he should be in jail.
The truth is not subjective. It is what it is.
It's an interesting thing.
You can't, he supports my side, he's a good guy, until he supports your side, and then he's a bad guy.
Yeah, that's what you see happening.
That's the sign you're brainwashed.
Yeah,
I have 2 written down here so far, and I know I don't even need to write more because these will come rolling off our tongue. My number 1 is you're brainwashed if you think you can't be brainwashed.
There you go.
Well, wow, yeah. The obvious one.
Like if you think it's impossible,
like no, I'm good. Yeah.
Then you're, because that's one of the first things it made me question everything I ever knew. And I now totally understand, and I'm not sure which philosopher it was, maybe it was Shakespeare, who basically, in his evolution of thought, the only conclusion he could come to was that I can think. That's all I know that is real. That's it. Right. And then you start to build a reality based on what you truly can know. Truly.
Yeah.
Wipe out every assumption and start over. Even the ones that you are so absolutely certain about. So certain. Wipe out. Start over. Get your own answers. That's, for me, if you don't think you can be brainwashed, that's a sign.
Or if you think, why would anyone go to all that effort to just, brainwash everybody? It's a ridiculous idea. That's also a good sign that you're probably already brainwashed. I mean, if you just dismiss it right out of the gate. That's, there's no way the government's doing that. They're not going to... there's no mind. There's no mind control.
The government could never pull off. How would they keep?
Well, why would
all
they
those
do that?
secrets? They're so disorganized. They could never do.
Yeah, they would never. Why would they do something like that?
They play disorganized.
That's another sign that you're probably a little bit touched. Brainwashed is probably a better word than touched. But
if you get the majority of your information and your opinions from a television set, and I don't care what channel or what show or what movie or whatever. If you get solely your information from there, you are you can't help but be brainwashed. You are brainwashed.
Yeah. I just keep going back to the Fidel Castro stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, you get to a mindset and we talk about being brainwashed. If you get to a mindset where because you know the facts, the truth of the situation to a point that it's enough. You pretty much know Fidel Castro was a horrible guy. He was a demonic human being. He was terrible. I mean, he was a mass murderer. It's terrible. And then you hear a broadcast of somebody saying, he was a clever, iconic figure. Is going to be, remembered by the Cuban people fondly and all this kind of stuff. You hear it, you instantly are like, what? When some people listen to that and they're like, yeah, Fidel was pretty cool.
Well, there's
this
still
is so
some
crazy
resistance to the idea. Colin Kaepernick, the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, has been just grilled because he came out saying that Fidel Castro did some good things. He built a better education
when
system.
When will this guy learn to just keep his mouth shut?
It's craziness.
Well, here again, I think that he was fine kneeling during the.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with that.
I have no issue with that.
As long as he's not burning a flag while he's kneeling.
Yeah,
I don't have an issue.
But all that does is incites people to start looking at things for themselves. So New World Order 101 is he's going to be discredited, and I have listened to like some sports shows talking about what the hell is this guy talking about Fidel Castro in this way? Fidel Castro was a son of a bitch, basically. But it is interesting that all I've seen this week after his death are several interviews with stupid college kids that don't know jack.
Yeah.
Saying, "Oh, he was a good guy." Well, why was he a good guy? And then they don't know. They don't know. You don't even know where you get your assumptions.
That's the difference in thought.
He was a good guy.
Process.
Free stuff. He was a good guy.
They hear he was a hero. They hear somebody say it, so they're like, "Oh, that guy was probably pretty cool." And then they publicly state that he was a pretty cool guy, and then ask why was he cool, and they don't know the answer to that question. Well, when they hear somebody say he was some kind of iconic hero, they don't instantly say they don't know. So they're not their mindset is not going to tell them that that's BS. Why is this? It's ridiculous that they're even saying these things. They just accept it.
They're just trusting a teacher who is working off of essentially a curriculum that was handed down to them, whether the teacher themselves approves it or not, and Common Core math, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
I can't find a single teacher that thinks this is a good idea. You keep going up the chain, and the Department of Education that puts their stamp on this, you find, someone was appointed to this position that shoved this through. Well, isn't it ironic that this person has a ton of ties to the elite, to the synagogue of Satan, basically, is what they are. I mean, we were warned against this. And, I mean, we're now to the point where we think we're all smart and advanced as a society, and we're confident in our stupidity. I mean, we are really confident that somehow all science science is real, and I respect it. But science has been used to disprove things that are true more so than not. And one of the signs you're brainwashed is if you've never, for instance, and I'm not going to say read the Bible, studied it. If you've never studied it, but you think it is a mythical BS, and by the way, I'm talking to myself circa 7 years ago. I was in this group, so I've now been on both sides of the fence. I can speak intelligently about what it's like on both sides of the fence. I get it, because I used to argue with creationists saying, you're an effing idiot, not knowing why I was so upset. Then again, looking back on it, was signs of my own brainwashing. But if you have discounted that book without really looking at it yourself, and I got to say more than looking at it, because everyone's probably opened a Bible once. Everyone I talk to says, I read the Bible. Really? I mean, I've actually been studying it like multiple hours a day now for 5 years. I can't say I've read the whole thing.
Right.
It's just too complex of a document. But there is no doubt in my mind. I've come to the same conclusion that actually Bill Cooper did in his famous CNN interview when he said, I think I sent you guys a text when I found this little nugget, because he said, he goes, either there's a group of powerful people that are playing out the book of Revelation exactly as it was written, or there really is a God and he really did predict the future. So if you don't think that what's in there is true and is going to absolutely frickin' happen, you have your own beliefs about being reincarnated or about you'll probably get into heaven or because you're a good guy. If you have your own belief system, I'm telling you right now, you're effed. You're absolutely screwed. Our lives don't end at death. That's a personal belief and one based on faith. But the fact that book makes 2,000, and it's really 66 books. And if you include the Apocrypha, we're close to 90-some books. They make so many predictions about the future that none of them are wrong. They're so exact in detail that it is impossible that this was random chance. I mean, statistically, it's so impossible. I haven't put a number on it yet, but it's impossible. It's just absolutely impossible.
Yeah.
But if you've discounted it before you've read it, you're being worked on by an evil entity at the end of the day that just simply wants to have you in his kingdom where you will be essentially tortured in pain for eternity. Like, you guys, we've lived our human life is more than half over, pretty much, right?
Statistically speaking, yeah.
I'm not going to live 150 years.
Yeah.
Assuming if
Maybe.
72 is what it is, we're more than
We're on the downslope, dude.
Shit.
How fast has this gone by?
Yeah, we're on the downslope.
Do you understand how long eternity is?
And the older you
No.
get, the faster it goes by.
I don't know how we could.
Can't. How could we
We
comprehend
don't.
that?
We could say we can understand it, but you can't really understand it.
No,
because-
I understand eternity because I've been in the Secretary of State.
But I mean, something that is infinite, not finite. We're confined to things, including our own bodies. If you want to go that far with it, we're not really. There's some things the human mind can't imagine. You kind of relate, like it never ends. You understand the
Right.
concept by definition, but to really understand existing in that condition is something that's impossible to understand
When I say
because you've never done it.
that you are playing with fire by not looking into this, by trusting your neighbor who said the book was bullshit, by trusting your textbooks that said you had nothing to see here, by trusting television which subliminally makes fun of everything in there as wackiness, where we start to form an opinion that it's a mythical BS before we've ever looked at it ourselves. When I say you are playing with fire, I mean this literally. If you've ever stuck your hand in a fire for a second and been burned,
Well, yeah, we've all done
have.
this.
Do you understand?
For sure.
When I say you're
Yeah.
playing with fire, and this book describes this pretty clearly, the amount of physical pain that you will feel forever is put your whole body in that fire and never pull it out. That's it. That's the rest of your existence. I mean,
Yeah,
can you
that's-
imagine how much you would dread knowing that you were going to feel that sort of pain for 30 minutes 1 year from now? I mean, it would affect you.
Yeah, that would be a problem.
Now, people will they will spend hundreds of hours looking at their 401k so they can have a comfortable retirement. But they will spend zero time ensuring, even if they think it is a 0.0000001% possibility that this place is real, they won't even look into it. But by the time you realize it's real, it's too late. And that is the level of pain you will feel forever.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's
it speaks to brainwashing. I mean, I've heard people have said this right to me. Well, I believe in science, so, that stuff's...
yeah.
not
And the funny thing is, science proves that there are alternate dimensions here in our reality. And it's funny that God also said, how the heavens and the earth are separated. It's not by distance. It's by, I don't want to put words.
Something else.
There is that book authenticates itself. So, I mean, when you find with your own eyes 500, and I'm probably at that point now where I've seen 500 predictions that absolutely came to pass, some of them specifically on the day they were predicted. Yeah, it's a thick read, and you might have to do a little extra homework. But you know what? You also took the time to learn how to manage your stock portfolio. Okay, so you're smart enough to handle complex.
How hard was Windows?
Terms exactly. Do
Yeah,
you
but-
understand
but all
what
these-
you're playing with?
But all these scientists have already done all this research. We know that this, and this, and A, B, C, and X, Y, Z. So I'm not gonna waste my time reading that.
We had
Like that would be an attitude that you would get. I'm a scientist. I don't even. Just as much as I'm not interested in sitting down and reading the story of Cinderella, I'm not interested in reading that story either, because I already know, based on science, that that's not true. That's
because Ross Geller on Friends would
It's
just say it's science,
it's science,
and we don't want to be against the group. And Ross Geller's so
Well,
popular.
you can't
I mean,
argue
he's
with science, right? It's just like,
But what
Yeah.
he's really saying is, it's religion. You can't argue with religion. Like when we had Catherine's friend Troy in here, who is evolutionary, believes in evolution. And you get to that point where, okay, we concede, stipulate that certain microevolution's a real thing. But explain to us how... Take us back to the beginning of how the 15 billion lines of DNA code that we have, which science has discovered that.
yeah,
How did it get started? How did that program write itself? And I have never met a self-proclaimed scientist, geneticist, intellectual that can explain it. So really, at the end of the day, you're putting faith in something. Really, it's just
it requires faith.
Yeah, they're just-
at some
you're
point.
calling
And-
something science because that is the socially more acceptable word for what an intelligent person would do. But do you understand? You've been brainwashed into thinking that what you're calling science really is a religion. And it's an even shittier religion than a lot of the other religions out there, because they have a very clear explanation for how those 15 billion lines of code came together. They were put together by a creator God. But that explanation is, and I did this for the vast majority of my life, that explanation is thrown out the window before they even start. And other scientists have said this, so this must be scientific. And since I don't want to be a wacko religious nut, thank you, social programming on mainstream television. They fall for it. They fall for the trick. And so then you get a bunch of self-described intellectuals who are then passing on their own incorrect, absolutely fallible theory as fact when it's nothing more than their religion with the label of science. And I think all religions, whether it has the label of science, Catholic, Hebrew, Muslim, all of them are. Stop identifying those labels are going to get you in so much trouble. Put your own eyes into some books and start reading, because I guarantee you, the God that made this place, that predicted all the future, He said He's a just God, and He was clear in 100 different ways to Sunday what happens. Because we are not fighting. Everyone thinks of war as territories and boundaries. I mean, there are 3 levels of war. There's, level 1 is we're at war with ISIS and Al Qaeda. Okay, and we're at war with maybe it's Vietnam or Grenada or Russia or Germany, depending on the year. These are wars of. The first one is an ideological one. Second one is a territorial one. That's the one most people are comfortable with. But people fail to understand the third level, and it's only been in recent history, because if you go read the memoirs of presidents, it was right up through Kennedy. Every president, specifically, God and Jesus Christ in the Bible were a part of their daily life. And that has been gone since the death of Kennedy. Absolutely gone. And here again, the same way we've converted anti-communists into
Carter and Reagan were both.
Oh, they were still perhaps Christian, but they weren't on the air talking about, Jesus Christ is the foundation of this nation. They weren't saying that by the 80s. That was already out. Okay? You couldn't be elected on that kind of thing. Internally, were they? Yeah, Reagan, I suspect, was.
Yeah, once in office.
But certainly from Bush Sr., we know for a fact.
Sure.
Yeah, different.
And it's been gone completely since then. And the same way that you've been tricked into hating communism to now starting to like the figures that represent communism like Fidel Castro or whatever it might be. Do you understand the same thing has happened when we allowed this mainstream media monster to become fueled by the Federal Reserve? All this started in 1913. This is very recent history. When we look back at Roman times, the Romans were in power for 1,000 years. Roughly 600 BC to 400 AD, give or take. And we'll read one sentence about 100-year period of the Roman, and we'll lop it all in together like, it was all one period of time. But do you understand, 100 years is nothing. This is happening so fast, we just don't notice it because for us, time goes by 60 minutes an hour. But think of, in a mere generation, where we are today.
Yeah.
Ideologically, in that third level of war, which is spiritual. And that's what people no longer believe is real anymore, is that we are in a spiritual war. And if you don't think that, you're in big, and I mean the worst sort of trouble, much more trouble than you could ever get in your physical human body. Much more. We're talking, this is a terror of such level, of such massiveness, that once people figure out the truth, they do what we do. They throw their personal lives aside to warn, essentially, as many people as possible. Because we know what we know, what we believe. And, you could swear on a stack of, any of us would swear on a stack of Bibles that there is some place, we're going to go, every human, do you guys believe this? All, our soul, our being, our essence, our memories, our personality, whatever, let's call that a soul. Is there anyone, do you guys believe that it's going somewhere after this physical body dies?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're told, yeah.
Are you 100% certain or just 99.9?
At this point in my life, I'm 100% certain.
I'm 100% myself.
Absolutely 100% certain.
That's a hard question to answer. I guess I don't think about it.
For me personally,
no question in my mind.
I'm 100% certain. I'm certain to the point where if someone walked in with a machine gun into this room right now and told me to denounce that, I'll die before I denounce it because I understand what the penalty is for. But it's certain in my mind, certain, and that's not because I needed to fill some hole in my heart because I was looking for something. That is actually, ironically, the result of scientific research. And if you think the Bible can't be proven scientifically, there's another sign that you're brainwashed because you haven't looked at it yet.
Well, because it does. Science often proves the Bible accurate. Quite often.
Archaeology proves the Bible accurate.
Most of the disciplines have inevitably end up at the conclusion that the only real possibility here is that there's a God. Based on they've taken it to that point now. Most disciplines, physics, genetics, even archaeology to this point is having a hard time.
Look, you guys can decide to believe Anderson Cooper, Bill O'Reilly, or you can. Who's the smartest person that existed in the 20th century? Who?
Me.
Okay.
Any other smartest person?
Worse than I thought
to live in the 20th century.
According to our, who Who do you think is who's the smartest person out? I mean,
well, people mostly would say Albert Einstein.
Thank you,
or,
Albert.
You know,
that's the answer I was looking for. Now, don't you find it ironic that the person that most people, in pop culture attribute, he is the picture boy for intelligence?
Yeah.
Do you
still study his brain to this day?
Do you find it odd that man came to the conclusion and spoke heavily about this, that there absolutely is a God?
Yeah. No, I knew that.
So another way I'll say it is, you're a dumbass if you disagree with Albert Einstein.
Right, because he's
smarter than you are.
Yeah, he probably is. But you would rather listen to Peter Jennings or Dan Rather.
Dude, you just got to put a lab coat on, and people will listen to you. If you have a lab coat on and like safety glasses on your forehead and like rubber gloves and
not
test
a butcher's
tubes,
coat.
No, not like that. But there are people that will listen to you if you wear something like this. But if you put a label on, this is David
blah,
Hooper,
blah, blah.
PhD from the university or wherever, and you come out and say something, no matter how outlandish it is. I mean, people will just be like, oh, because.
And if people
the guy's a PhD. I mean, come on.
If people ever understood that our whole college educational system is really an indoctrination system, and I went to a pretty good school, and a lot of my buddies went on to get master's degrees, PhDs. They're actually further from the truth than a dude that dropped out of high school. Because they're so certain about their fallacies that they won't even bother to look. That's dismissive, and that's ignorant.
That's the thing, is that often higher education gives you a false sense of enlightenment.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah. Well, when the ranks,
I've got a master's degree in
when the ranks
bullshitology
of the staff are packed with radical Marxist-minded people. Professors, these tenured, I mean, you get some real radical people out there educating our senior children, and it's on full display now. I mean, just look at stuff that's going on after the election. I mean, this is not a normal reaction from.
But think about it. Do you not understand? You're brainwashed if you agree with the fact, and this still is happening today. Professors that teach creation, or even consider the possibility, they lose their jobs.
Oh, yeah, no, you
now, you
can't.
don't think that puts pressure? Do you understand the Nazi-esque fashion of how we keep the everyone's going to shut up if you want to keep your job, and you don't teach them anything else. If you're a teacher that wants to teach a class on 9/11 truth like Kevin Barrett, what happens? You're booted out of the University of Wisconsin or Minnesota, wherever he was teaching. That's what happens. But we keep putting our trust. Well, my diploma says Princeton. It says Harvard. And I've read in so many magazines that, this is the pinnacle of education. Never stopping to question, maybe does Harvard have it wrong? Now, I understand, because I've seen, you understand the momentum of humanity and the fact that just because you're a Harvard professor doesn't mean you have courage. Doesn't mean you have the balls to say the truth. It means more so likely that, damn, I get laid more because I'm from Harvard, and I can use that Harvard. I drop Harvard, and it helps me get into restaurants, and I get interviewed on TV show. I mean, there's a lot. Harvard is a good thing, but have you ever stopped to think about the fact that that's part of this deception mechanism? And go back and look how our college education system was created. Go look at the history of our parochial school education. It was built by the same evil cabal, and you can follow their bloodline that Jesus Christ called himself the synagogue of Satan. And there is a worldwide deception. Obviously, we now see it. We've seen the evidence. Wake up, people. I'm in Bill Cooper mode tonight.
Right.
Oh, my.
Well, and a lot of it's so subtle. I mean, even schools, I think they're slamming Stephen Bannon about this now. 'cause apparently they got him on audio talking about how it's an issue that they now just are in some schools, and I didn't hear the audio. I just heard it secondhand, somebody referring to it, where they're attacking him because
tell us who's Steve Bannon. Tell us.
He's Stephen K. Bannon, Breitbart News, appointed
Trump's
chief strategist.
Yeah.
He's the guy that's being touted as a white supremacist, Nazi kind of guy. I haven't found evidence of this yet because I've looked a little bit, but he's recently being attacked about a statement he made that it's a problem that when they teach evolution, they're not teaching the theory of evolution anymore. They're just teaching evolution. They're dropping the theory word out of there. This seems like a subtle difference, but that's a major
Look,
difference.
By Darwin's own
major difference.
By his own definition, his own theory has
theory.
failed. It has failed.
Well, yeah.
What he said we would find does not exist, and we now, there are not. We would find not one missing link, thousands. That little picture that we all have in our mind of evolution of going from monkey to man. We've seen that then there's Neanderthal, then there's Cro-Magnon man, then there's, we've all seen that diagram that goes where we go from monkey to man. Everyone, National Geographic, part of the brainwashing
I bet
system.
you chimps are pissed.
Well, I've seen bumper stickers with this, so it's, with that image.
And again, the way people think is we look at that picture and that right there, that's
what happened.
That's the proof.
Yeah.
And National Geographic, I remember famously coming out in the 70s, and I read this as a kid because my dad would get this, and we found the missing link. Like, we're looking for one particular missing link, but by Darwin's own definition, we will have found thousands, hundreds
millions.
of thousands. Yeah, thank you. Between each stage, and from there we will find evidence of unsuccessful mutations that did not work.
Right.
Now, archaeology really began in Darwin's time, and it is in 150 or so years, we have dug up almost the entire Earth one way or another. We've not found even one missing link. Yet we should have found.
Oh, there should be millions.
Millions.
Should be littered with them.
The funny thing is, we should find, because theory of evolution, and if you don't understand how stupid, and I'm talking to myself 7 years ago, if you don't understand how stupid you are saying that you came from a rock. You came from a banana. You came from a lesser being. So can you imagine what a half man, half banana skeleton would look like? We should have found crosses between every living.
Yeah, some flippers. It didn't work out. So, you'd find, you would think, but there's not because that didn't happen.
I had a conversation. Hi, Kat.
Hi, Kat.
Hey, Cat.
I was having a conversation with one of Kat's friends on election night. And if I brought this up on air already, stop me. And self-described, 10 minutes, self-described science-driven guy, logical science-driven guy.
Scientist by trade.
Okay, even better. And I normally, I set people up almost like a prosecutor sets up his witness, paints him into a corner, and then hits him with the kabamo. And I'm like, all right, how long has the Earth been around? Your longest possible estimation. I think he said 5 billion years, which is roughly standard in scientific.
That's probably
circles.
average.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that the age of the universe as a whole is 15 billion. Okay. That's what is taught in most, roughly in most textbooks. So I said, all right, let's just take 15 billion. Set that aside for a minute. And then I asked him, I said, do you know anything about DNA? And he said, a little bit. And I said, well, do you know how many, essentially, how many bits of information, how many lines of code there are inside of a single, it's not a simple cell like Darwin said, it's actually unbelievably complex with the ability to duplicate itself and to how many lines of code there are. And he did not know that offhand, and I explained to him that there are over 15 billion, essentially, these proteins that have to come together in a very particular order, and it's a miniature, it's a microscopic factory, but there's essentially 15 billion working parts. And he's like, okay. So then I said, now do you understand that for your theory to be true, that somehow these 15 billion lines of code had to come together and work in harmony? He said, yes, I absolutely. And I used the analogy of Windows, which is a small fraction of 15 billion lines of code. Maybe someone can Google how many lines of code Windows has, but I'd be surprised if it was more than a few million. And we all know what happens when there's a mutation in your Windows code. Your computer shuts down.
Yeah, any code would.
So I said, essentially what you're telling me then, another way to say this is every year from the beginning of the universe, assuming, and you're saying the Earth is only 5 billion years old. So in your theory, there would have to be 3 successful mutations on average per year.
Per
year.
And per gender.
Well, that I hit him with that one after, but he'd already checked out because he
had already checked out.
Were you meaning
when you started telling him aliens?
Were you meaning line codes?
Yeah.
Windows 10 around 50 to 60 million line codes.
Okay,
Yeah,
50 to 60 million.
Yeah,
Right.
XP.
So
had XP.
that is 1%. That is 3% of 15 billion. Windows is a simple program compared to what makes humanity operate, what makes you think. And I'm not even talking about symbiotic systems where we need a brain to develop and eyeballs in order to see, or we need lungs and veins to develop in order to get the oxygen our brain. I'm not even talking about that. I was just talking to him from a perspective of, do you understand you need one successful, this was under the numbers he gave me, and I gave him tons of error room, assuming that we had 15 billion years to get this program accidentally put together. And I said, so you understand what you're telling me is that there's an average of one successful mutation every year since the beginning of time, or if you think the Earth is only 5 billion years old, that means we need 3 successful mutations.
Yeah, it has to work.
And actually now we double the statistical improbability of it because we also have to commensurately, at the exact same time, have to have those same mutations happening in the opposite gender. And now not only does that have to happen for humans, it has to happen for essentially every species on the planet.
Right.
Yet somehow
it's pretty lucky.
That just sounds
we
random
all
to me.
share DNA, which to me that goes nowhere near proving evolution. That to me only reinforces the fact that, well, it's the same. If Honda makes 2 types of cars and they have the same drivetrain, I don't think a Honda Civic is going to evolve into a Honda Passport. I do think that the designers of Honda may have been efficient and used some of the same systems in cars instead of duplicating something. But his theory is based on the fact that random chance. So not just in humanity. So now we have to multiply that times 2 for females. And then it's times 2 for every male-female type of creature that existed. And you now have a probability of that happening. We're now talking about you almost need somewhere in the world 10 successful mutations every day since the beginning of time to get us to where we are now. And we know no one wants to hear from their doctor your baby was born with a genetic mutation. It does
Right.
not. You know,
It's not a good thing.
you do a genetic mutation. You do a mutation on Windows, which is only 50 million lines, and only. That's 3% of 15 billion.
If you put a period anywhere in that code
That's a mutation.
where it doesn't belong, it will It won't run.
I once accidentally deleted the font Times New Roman and flipped my computer out because it's a system font.
Yeah.
You pull-
Yeah. It didn't evolve and use Old English instead.
No. It didn't even default to Arial.
Right.
It flipped
It's done.
out.
It's all
was
done.
You
wrecked.
pull one of those 15 billion moving pieces out, just one,
It fails.
and you're going to have a hard time living.
Well,
You've got incredibly debilitating diseases that are, they shut down life. They don't. So I said, so even in your lifetime, I don't know if I already gave his name out, and if I did, I'm sorry, and if not, I'm not going to say it again. Okay. Mr. Man here, even in your lifetime, that means you're how old, 50? So you should have already seen 50 successful genetic mutations in your life.
In yourself.
But based on your theory of how old the Earth is, you should have seen 150.
Well, and also, to just complicate it further, each new human beings being kind of unique here, every human being that's born is absolutely unique, never to be repeated. So there's only one of you, thank God. There's only one of, you know what I'm saying? And if every child that's born is also unique in appearance, physiologically different.
Look at our fingerprints.
Some people have
No one
allergies.
has-
Some fingerprints are
no
all
one has the
unique.
same.
No two people are the same. So you have that to even you can make a comparison about cars, which mathematically makes it simple. But every one of those Honda Civics is essentially identical within a measurable metric.
Right.
Where human beings, no two humans, even identical twins, have differences. There's never a carbon copy ever. Ever. So not only does all this have to be successful from the mutation standpoint, but it also has to somehow change into something totally unique and then never happen again.
Yeah, because what would have happened is a mutation happens. You know, we start to become, in the evolutionary theory, we start to become human-like. And again, it's got to be happening with multiple living creatures simultaneously. So we're talking now multiple times of impossibility. But at some point, there's just one. A male and a female somehow separate. And if there's one mutation in the male, that thing dies off.
Yeah,
It's
usually
dead.
doesn't make it, yeah.
So how do we... Oh, we got to wrap it up here.
Well, I
Bottom
think
line is evolution. If you want, don't be intimidated by the subject. DNA, genetics. Don't be intimidated by thinking it's complicated. It's probably not as complicated as your own 401k portfolio. Look into it and ask yourself some tough questions. Ask yourself how the heck we could have gotten here.
Yeah, are you brainwashed
It could
or are you
save
not?
more than your life. And with that, Howard, you want to send us off?
This has been Down the Rabbit Hole. We'll see you next week. Thanks, Kenny.